Hey, everybody, welcome to the Unconventional Therapist Guide to Nothing. My name is Dave. I'm joined here with my co host, Greg. How is everybody doing? I don't even know where to start. We've been trying to record numerous times tonight. I think we're having a little trouble because we're in the middle of a major snowstorm, and
Yeah,
I
Dave.
think there might be some internet lag. We'll see what the
Yeah,
recording sounds like. So, yeah, it's been tough go here.
it's been tough go. Yeah,
But yeah, major snowstorm today, craziness. We're still here doing this. Hopefully, we make it through this episode, and yeah, we'll feel relieved to get this one
we
done. I
will.
think. Yeah.
I think so. Patriots going to the Super Bowl. For the third
Yes.
time, I'll mention that to you.
Yeah, 2 feet of snow, Patriots Super Bowl, shoveling. Yeah, that's the recap of what we've
We went
already.
through that.
Yeah. We got some new Patreon members, which you want to give a big shout out to. We got first off on a paid tier, we got Ray Heavy Mayo supporting the podcast. Thank you so much, Ray. Appreciate you supporting and listening and just pledging some support to help keep this thing going. We got some new free Patreon members. Want to give them a shout out too. We got Richella Liss and Marianne Lefebvre.
Okay.
Hope I
Wow, that's
said
a
those correctly.
French accent I think you got there.
You're
I think they
right.
might both be French. Maybe.
Lise, probably, right?
Yeah, and Lefebvre for sure. And
Lefebvre.
Ray, who has always been a good f friend of the podcast, and we
I
appreciate.
think that's French too. Mayo,
Yeah, Heavy Mayo.
heavy mayo.
Yeah.
And then as we mentioned, last week and the week before, we've been asking people to send us questions for us to answer in an upcoming episode. So we have one from a very active supporter and listener. I'm going to have to use her Instagram handle because I actually don't know her name. She is a, what'd you say? How'd
Legit,
you say it?
legit 95.
Legit. Legit 95. Okay. But yeah, she's been doing a big back catalog listen binge, I would say, right?
We love
Recently,
that.
and then kind of giving us some feedback as she goes, which has been really awesome to hear have someone kind of relive our previous episodes, ones that I didn't even remember. And
Mhm.
give feedback as she's going through it. So that's been really cool. But she asked if we would list like 5 to 10 books that we think everyone should read. I don't think we have to do it individually. We can probably just collectively recommend some books, Greg.
Yeah, and I think, and we kind of messaged back and forth, legit 95 and myself, that this could be a potential and will be a bonus episode for sure because I love this idea and I loved kind of doing it around Christmas time. But yeah, Dave, I'm sure you and I, all right, first of all, we've done books, so I
Right.
think those are important to us, right? So The
Yep.
Alchemist and Man's Search for Meaning. Um,
I think those are probably our top two. I don't know if you have one that you would include even higher than that.
Not higher than those. Nope. That's those are the ground floor. Those are pretty good for I mean, I'm not saying they're the literary giants. I would be like more into like Dostoevsky or Steinbeck for like things like that. Um, there's a lot of cool short stories like The Interlopers, The Lady or the Tiger, um, The Yellow Wallpaper we've talked about a
Yeah,
few
we've
times.
talked about that. Metamorphosis.
Metamorphosis was good, and then
Okay.
Things Fall Apart. We did that book, which was pretty important. And depending on like it would have to like depend on like mood and like what you were looking to accomplish.
That's
Rules for a
that's
Night is another good one.
sure, and that's why I think we end up talking a lot about Alchemist and Man's Search for Meaning because I
Mhm.
think those fit so many different categories and issues that people might be dealing with. So I think it's one that I find I commonly am,
Mhm.
suggesting. But you're right. I mean, a lot of the other ones I think could kind of fall into like what a person's feeling. I just had
Yeah.
one and I totally lost it. There was
Well,
another.
Grapes of Wrath for me is a really important book. East
Mhm.
of Eden, so that's two Steinbeck ones. I've been on a little kick for that, but always.
Yeah.
Um, and then like like I said, like when I'm not trying to read a book to get something out of it, I have to admit, like I'm a Stephen King fan, like, and not just a horror. I love his short stories. I love like Hearts in Atlantis and um, he just this book Fairy Tale that is going to be a show. I kind
Yeah.
of really like that. I mean, so I'm kind of all over the map when it comes to books, and I'd have to really kind of put my mind to top five or 10. I mean, we've we've probably talked about so many books, you and I, that we've forgotten so many that we
Yeah.
would like should be hitting us on the head right
I
now.
think
But
The Stranger by Camus was one that I read early on that kind of
The Fall,
shaped
yep,
shaped
Camus
my way
as
of
well.
thinking about things. Yeah, The Fall was another one. I'm a big Chuck Palahniuk fan,
Mhm.
especially his early works. So for me, that satire really, and it's like he touches on some really interesting themes in his book. So I do think there's value in that fiction work too. And the same with Bret Easton Ellis, which I know Greg probably isn't on the same page with me on that one, but some of that like self-loathing, boredom. I mean, I was really connecting with that in my 20s, and I think it kind of like hearing somebody else write about it in such like a uh exploitative way, I guess. I don't even
Yeah,
know how to like say it, but it for me, I feel like that like hit me in my some of my formative years, and you know was kind of helpful working through some stuff. This
it is funny too that you mentioned like, oh, it hit me in my 20s because books hit you different at
Yeah,
different ages, the really good ones. I think I just like the over the Christmas I talked about the book I read, Stoner. If I read that in my 20s, I'd have been like, this is a completely useless piece of literature. But and I read it in my 40s,
yeah,
and I was like, oh, like this is important, and this is just kind of like about a beautiful, mundane, sort of meaningless slash completely meaningful
sure.
life. You know what I mean? It's I don't know. There's just something about it
you
that's
know
really
One more that was like one I read in like high school or something like that that always stuck with me. It might have even been earlier. Flowers for Algernon, I
loved it.
think was an excellent book. I think there's some great messages in there. It's kind of you see that theme in like a lot of different ways. There's another book called Ishmael where I think it's an ape or something that is
Yeah,
kind of
dude,
like the
it's
same
about
line. It's
levers
like,
and takers. That I hit that book pretty hard too.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
Ishmael, that was good, and he kind of talks about the different kinds of people that there are. It's kind of a really like philosophical book. Um, yeah, that's a great one actually. And
Oh,
see, that's
and
yeah,
Hemingway.
all day.
Yeah,
Well,
the
Hemingway,
title of
The
my
Sun
favorite one
Also
is
Rises,
that's the one I was thinking of. There's some great
very
quotes in
important.
there. I think that's a really really important book.
Farewell to Arms is a very important book. And then
Yeah,
like the original like Grendel, which is like everyone's read Beowulf, but Grendel for me is like from the monster's point of view. So it's like it really kind of gets into like trauma and like how your parents set you up for nonsense. You know what I
sure,
mean? No matter
sure.
what. And sort of like, you're not you're just kind of thrown into a life. You don't really choose it. And so like how do you deal with that?
What's
Motley
an
Crue book,
interesting.
I read
What is
that
it?
book.
Oh yeah, yep.
And that's like we talk all the time about um avoiding pleasure-seeking behavior and the chaos that can ensue from that. Well, that's a perfect description of that and how they all kind of figure that out eventually
Hmm.
or die.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
Another interesting thing is like you might read a book. You know how we were talking about like the point of your life where you read it. You also might read it again later in life and not find it as captivating or important. I kind of feel that way about Catcher in the Rye. After
uh
the reread, I kind of am like, it suddenly didn't feel as heavy as it did when I was younger, which it just, I think is a more of a reflection of me than the book itself, because
yeah.
obviously the text didn't change. But yeah, when we reread it the second time, I was like, oh wow, this is I just had a totally different feeling from it the first time I read it.
Well, it's like some like the adolescents are kind of like the worst sometimes.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean? And like I say that with actively with children that age in my house, but
right.
like 18 years old. It's like very selfish kind of, what's funny is like I wonder if the opposite could be true because The Great Gatsby I read when I was probably
Mhm.
22, like on a boat in the Navy, and I was thinking like um this is gonna be this is the one. Save this for the, you know what I mean? And I was like, this book's not even that good. And
Yeah,
I gotta get into it again because all signs point to I was wrong on that, and like I want to figure out why. And maybe I'm not. I don't know. Um, Memoirs of a Geisha I read on the boat too, and that was really good.
okay.
Uh,
See, my problem right now is all my like recreational reading is horror reading.
mhm.
And it's good, but it's not anything I'm going to recommend on here. I've been doing a ton of book reviews lately on my other platform, and that then interferes with my reading of non-horror related work. And not that there's not sometimes a lot of value to horror work, but the types of books I've been reading lately just haven't really fit this mold.
Well, there's this author, Eric Larson, who that just you saying that popped into my mind because Devil in the White City is like an H.H. Holmes
Yeah.
book, but it's also about the Chicago Fair and like architecture in Chicago and kind of tells a dual story. And that's what he does with like his historical fiction, but it's also really like close to I mean, the only thing that's fiction about it is like the conversations. How could he possibly be aware of those?
Mm-hmm.
But there's one called The Splendid and the Vile, and it's about Churchill. That's incredible. There's one called Dead Week, and it's about like submarines during World War One, or maybe that's about the Lusitania. I've just read so many of this guy's books that
Yeah.
like they're all so good. There's one called In the Garden of Beasts, and it's about like the American ambassador going to Nazi Germany before it's Nazi Germany, but like seeing things going very poorly and being like, I don't know. But again, this is a pretty heavy, legit 95. I hope you appreciate this, but we'll get into this for you.
Yeah, well, it's funny. It just dawned on me that like, oh wow, this question is really timely because of the episode we're doing today.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't even
yeah.
think of that as we were talking. I'm like, here we are. We're about to embark on a literary episode, which we've done from time to time, and we were listing off the books, and we didn't mention any H.P. Lovecraft, which is the topic of the episode today.
Because you know what? It's funny. As influential and I don't know, important maybe Lovecraft is to us because we're from Rhode Island
Yeah,
and because, obviously you're interested in horror. Um, I don't know. I get it. I like it and I understand. I appreciate him because he is, um, I don't know, so influential for other writers. And the fact that he grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, and known for his fiction and his Cthulhu mythos and characters that we see throughout pop culture, even leading up to like, I mean, Stranger Things is borrowing from Lovecraft,
oh, it's very
obviously.
Lovecraftian. Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, so like this whole unknown, unknowable, scary sort of existential dread, which I think is like a cool part of this, and we'll look into that a little bit more. But I also wanted to mention that it's cool, or not cool for him, but it's interesting that he was not sort of famous or well known in his time.
Yeah.
It reminds me like this posthumous death publications that happens with people like Van Gogh. People don't know, and I often use that Van Gogh with people who are suicidal because I'll say like Van Gogh killed himself thinking he was a complete failure as an artist. Do you think Van Gogh is a failure as an artist?
Right.
Even if you don't like that wide brushstroke thing or you're against that, whatever. Like you can't say that Van Gogh wasn't a success and like contributed wildly to art. And, so sometimes you have to admit that even though you may be done with the world's not done with you. So God only knows what the future holds for you. I mean, if Van Gogh would have like held on, he would have his mood would have changed. Let's say that, right?
Yeah. It's
And
also
then one
very cool that he actually has like a what would be the word? He has a style or some kind of influence named after like utilizing his name. The term
sure.
Lovecraftian is thrown around all the time, and I just think that's so cool that he has such a specific or heavy influence that you actually it's like David Lynch. They'll say things are Lynchian if it's like
Well,
that
David, I
surreal.
mean George Orwell, like Orwellian. Like there's not a lot of that.
There isn't. There isn't. And so, I mean,
So
Lovecraft is one of those few people whose influence is so heavy that it's actually considered its own style that people borrow from and utilize frequently.
So and then one last thing I'll say about the posthumous thing. I had an English professor a long time ago, obviously, and he recommended this book, The Third Policeman, because it had a little bit of more lore and like gravitas to it because it was like a posthumous thing, like someone found it
Mm-hmm.
and published it, and it's just like this really weird little book, The Third Policeman. For whatever reason, there's something important about that book, and people should check it out.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it's cool. It's like about the afterlife and it's just a really kind of strange kind of story and look at that. Um, I mean, it's not going to win any Pulitzer prizes or whatever, but it's pretty good and pretty cool. Anyways, Dave, why don't you tell us a little bit about this Howard Phillips?
Howard Phillips Lovecraft was born on August 20th in 1890, so ages ago. And the cool thing about this story, his story, is there's all these benchmarkers in our capital, Providence, um, Rhode Island, which makes this story, I think, for us that much cooler. But I understand that for people outside of here, it probably doesn't have that same appeal. But like you can walk down Angel Street in Providence and you can see the house that he was, born in or raised in, and you can see the house where he was brought up in and things like that. And I just think that's a really cool aspect of like his whole story. At the age of 3, his father suffered a nervous breakdown in a hotel room in Chicago and was brought back to Butler Hospital, where he remained for 5 years before dying in July 19th of 1898. So HP was obviously rather young at that time, and that
Yeah.
was pretty impactful, I would say. But he actually never was even told like the real reason for his father's passing. He was given a different explanation than what it actually was.
Which makes sense, and especially at the time. But you know, another thing that you kind of mention, the cool sort of, I don't know, like things that we may pass every day. Like I work at Butler Hospital,
Yeah.
so like H.P. Lovecraft's family, and we'll later find out H.P. Lovecraft himself,
Yep.
was in the same hallways, and the place was built in 1844. So it's like just a kind of a crazy. It probably looked exactly the same to him, you know? He was
Yeah.
like looking at the same building. It's just wild.
Absolutely. Um, I would say he sounds like he was a pretty intelligent child. So he was reciting poetry by the age of 2. He was reading at the age of 3. He was writing at the age of 6 or 7. One of his earliest works that he was really like enthused about was Arabian Nights, which he read by the age of 5, which is insane, right? I mean, just for him to be reading these works at such a young age. And he at that point was able to adapt the pseudonym Abdul Arizad, I think
Hmm.
is how you would say it, which later became the author of the mythical Necronomicon, which, if you're into this Lovecraftian world at all, you'll know because it's mentioned in so many movies, Evil Dead, just like so many different works use this Necronomicon.
I mean, the Necronomicon could literally be its own episode.
Yeah,
Let's
maybe
be
there will
honest.
be in Halloween time. Yes. So as a boy, he was somewhat lonely and suffered from frequent illnesses, many of them being psychological. But he continued to learn through reading, as his school attendance was rather sporadic. In 1904, his grandfather passed away, and due to the subsequent mismanagement of property and affairs, the family ran into some severe financial difficulties, and him and his mom had to move from this beautiful Victorian home to a much smaller, cramped home. And this really weighed on Lovecraft, and he started to apparently contemplate suicide. But for him, his meaning and his purpose in life was really about learning, and he was able to overcome a lot of those negative thoughts just through his passion of learning and just kind of continuing to truck on through that. But in 1908, just before he graduated high school, he suffered a nervous breakdown, and that compelled him to leave school, which caused him to not get his diploma. And he then also failed to get into Brown University, which became a source of shame for him in his later years.
So we're talking about some serious mental illness in
Yeah,
H.P. Lovecraft's family, and obviously some hereditary illness. So this isn't just like
absolutely.
environmental anxiety or something. Well, I mean, we're talking either, bipolar disorder or even potentially schizophrenia to be for his father to live the remaining days. I mean, a nervous breakdown, we're probably talking about a manic episode or something like that, right?
Something. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we just they
And
didn't have the language, and
right,
it's yeah.
exactly. That I think that's a big piece of this. They didn't have the understanding or the language. And then so, following this interpreted failure for the next like 5 years, he really struggled, and he wasn't doing much to kind of chase his interests or follow his passions at all. And on top of that, because of the close quarters and the dynamics of everything that started to change with the financial aspects, him and his mom got this really close, odd relationship. Um, and she was
Yep.
still suffering from like the trauma of her husband's illness and death, and kind of developed this pathological love-hate relationship with him. Which I mean, we've heard 1,000 times in some of our like serial killer episodes, like Ed
Yeah, like
Gein and things like
Oedipus.
that. Yeah, yeah.
Freud would
So
have
I
a ball
mean,
with that.
I'm sure that that all impacted his mental wellness like pretty significantly. But then his mother's mental and physical condition continued to. So following all this, his mother's mental and physical condition deteriorated, and she suffered a nervous breakdown herself in 1919. And she was admitted to Butler Hospital, like her husband,
Mhm.
and never emerged. So he lost her actually 2 years later, on in May of 1921. However, it wasn't because of the nervous breakdown that she passed away or anything like that. It was actually something with a bungled gallbladder operation. So just completely unrelated. But this obviously would impact him again rather significantly. So he had his father, his grandfather, his mother, all significant losses. Um, and then he ended up going to a convention in 1921. A few months later, he was able to get himself to go, and he met a woman there named Sonia Haft Green. She was a Russian Jewish woman, who was 7 years Lovecraft senior. He visited her in Brooklyn in her apartment in 1922, and then the news of their marriage came out in 1924. So he moved to Brooklyn into with her to her apartment. Um, he had gained himself a place as a writer for this Weird Tales publication. It's like a pulp magazine thing in 1923. And Sonia actually owned her own hat shop, which was successful on Fifth Avenue in New York.
Wow, that's pretty cool, actually.
It is pretty cool. And but here there's an interesting thing with that actually. So the couple unfortunately struggled pretty much immediately on their after their marriage. The hat shop went bankrupt.
Okay.
And he turned down a chance to edit a companion magazine to Weird Tales, because it would have caused him to have to move to Chicago. And Sonia's health gave way, forcing her to spend time in New Jersey in a New Jersey sanitarium.
Yeah.
So it's the mental illness in this story is like rampant, but just a ton of like highs and lows, right? Um,
Yeah.
he was trying to secure work during this time, but nobody was looking to hire a 34-year-old person with no job experience really. And on
You want to hear some weird tales?
yeah, his resume is just a bunch of like these crazy stories. They're like,
Yeah.
yeah, no. So in 1925, she went to Cleveland to take a job there, which is interesting because he turned down going to Chicago for a job. So it
Yeah.
already kind of tells you where the marriage might have been at. And then he ends up moving to a single apartment near the seedy Brooklyn area called Red Hook. And he just becomes more and more depressed and isolated, and kind of, feels this way because of the masses of foreigners, quote unquote, in the city. So you
Yeah.
just kind of start to get this picture of someone who's maybe like building up resentment for the world around them, feeling like there's no opportunities, everything happens to me wrong, but like all
Yep,
these
yep, yep.
people are coming
Everything
in.
happens to me. Why is this happening? Like a very like why me instead of what now type of person, which is
Exactly. And he's taking note of the change in dynamics around him. Like he's, noticing quote unquote foreigners. And it's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
like, it's like starting to like point fingers like, oh, they're the reasons these things, right? That's kind of like
Yeah.
that mindset.
Yeah. I mean, dude, come on. But the other thing is too, it's like you can tell. I don't know if you're going to talk about this, but like this because this is just coming up for me as you're just like doing the biography. It's like you can kind of understand why he would always write about these like unseen, um, sort of manageable, unable to quote unquote fight like things that happen because that's like his whole life. Like it's like the
Ooh,
chaos of life can come for you at any time, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. It's
yeah.
unseeable, it's no unknowable, and it can be completely devastating. It's essentially like
Yes.
this. He writes that's all in his writing, you know?
And then he calls everything unnameable in his stories, and like
Yeah.
because he hasn't actually seen anything because he's in his apartment all the time, just hiding.
Yeah. Well, I always thought that was always my biggest critique of him. So on one hand, like having these um unnameable, undescribable monsters is brilliant because, whatever's inside of your own subconscious is scarier to you than it would to be to anybody else. So
Yeah,
for me to create a monster that's really scary for me doesn't necessarily make it like, globally scary. But if you just say it's the biggest fear you can imagine, then like it's almost why like Pennywise the Clown has like an interesting sort of thing because it's like it's whatever you fear the most.
right.
So it's like personal to you. So that's brilliant. Also, like it does like that Jaws thing where it's like you don't show the monster that much. You just kind of have this like pending doom. But then at the same time, it kind of is a cop out because it's like unknowable, undescribable. And it's like, all right,
Yeah.
well, that's just saying like just imagine this wicked scary thing, scariest thing you can imagine, moving right along, you know?
I mean, this couldn't exist today.
Yeah,
People need
no.
to see everything, right? There's nothing to the imagination anymore. We're past that and we want to see everything. So that wouldn't work
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
So in early 1926, Lovecraft ends up returning to Providence. However, his aunt, who he was close with, um, doesn't allow Sonia to come, his wife, because she doesn't want her to start a business there and have her nephew connected or tainted by the stigma of a tradeswoman
Wow.
wife or something like that. Like there's this weird stigma around the fact that she has a business and her coming here and starting a business. It's like she would rather see HP sad and miserable and lonely than have him happy but have like a reputation.
Well, it's like that old money sort of aristocracy thought process. You remember we did a great episode on Blanche Monnier, the lady who got
Yeah.
like locked in a room for
Yep.
25 years because she was a French aristocrat and her family was like, "You're gonna hire some like loser working lawyer?" Like
Yeah.
gross. You know what I
So
mean? It's like what?
I mean, that's the reason he's given, or that's the reason that it's stated. But is it actually because she's a Russian Jewish woman?
Or,
You know,
or maybe is it like, to kind of give the aunt the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's because like she saw her nephew being like taken advantage of or like mistreated in
possibly.
some ways,
Sure.
because like
So
me, I don't know, who knows?
yeah. So I mean, at this point, the marriage is essentially over, and they end up divorcing in 1929. So by this time, the illness that would cause his own death, which was cancer of his intestine, had already progressed so far that there was little that could be done to treat it. And Lovecraft attempted to carry on in his increasing pain through the winter of 36 through 37. But he was finally compelled to enter the Jane Brown Memorial Hospital, which, if you're from here, you know that's part of Rhode Island Hospital, and that building stands today. It's a very creepy building, so very, very fitting for him. And on March 10th, 1937, he dies 5 days later after going there. And if you wanted to visit him today, you would go to his family plot, which is at Swan Point Cemetery in Providence. It's right on like Providence Pawtucket line. And it is an absolutely beautiful cemetery. I used to live right down the road and I would go pretty frequently. Um, his monument is not as beautiful as some of the other statues that are there, but it's still a very cool spot to visit. And you'll notice people always leave little trinkets. And yeah, absolutely beautiful cemetery though if you're ever in our area.
It is, and it's next to Butler.
It is next to Butler. That's right. So that's that story. I felt like I was going to go significantly shorter on the bio. We had talked about that originally, but when I started to read the things that happened in his life, I was like, no, 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 no. We have to actually talk about this because this builds into the point of our episode today, which is to cover a couple of the stories which we had announced before. We were going to do the Dunwich Horror and At the Mountains of Madness. But we also want to talk about the controversies connected with H.P. Lovecraft, which I think a lot of them can be understood through a case conceptualization given his history. I think you can kind of understand, not justify or validate, but at least understand how a person might develop some of the thought
Yeah.
processes or have some of those thought processes. So some of the big things are the themes and ideas of racism that is present in a variety of his writings and whether it's his letters or his actual works of fiction. There's a ton of stuff that has come out and some pretty clear and direct um, themes here. So some of his racial attitude has been seen as directly influenced by the time. Obviously, we're talking about the 20s, the tens of 20s, all that stuff. But it also could, I mean, it also could be a reflection of the New England society he grew up in. However, like his specific racism seemed stronger than the popular viewpoints held at the time. So while it might have been a viewpoint had in his, in his region and during that time, it still seemed like he took it a step farther than maybe the average citizen at that time.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know, Greg, if like you think anything about that. Does that seem like a valid reason? Like, let me put it differently, to say somebody's more racist than a common person of his,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
population. Does
yeah.
that does that feel like something we
Yeah, I
should
think he
take
was
away?
just it sounds like he was kind of just a curmudgeon,
Yeah,
like
he sounded angry.
he's an angry guy. Not a very happy person. I mean, we can't really we can only speculate, but just by the way he yeah, I mean, it seems like he was just like a negative, blaming others, trying to almost like a narcissistic kind of guy.
Yeah.
Um,
Another thing that I think like has led to a lot of the controversies is that some researchers are also noticed that like his views failed to change even in the face of like some increased social change at of the time. He just never seemed to change his viewpoints. It is noticed though, like later in his last year, he embraced things like socialism, Roosevelt's New Deal, and kind of dismissed some of his old right wing views, which I think is interesting. I wonder why it took him till his last year. But there is this one work that probably holds the most hostile racist views, and it's in a work of poetry. And I'm not going to say the entire title, but it's on the creation of N words, basically, is the title of the work, which I was like, holy crap, that's very
yeah.
specific and detailed. Um, and New England Fallen, both from 1912. So, I mean, these are, some earlier works of his. Um, yeah, he had some pretty like extreme and explicitly characterizing like, black people as subhuman
Yeah.
in the work. I guess I can quote this. This seems like a shorter quote. So when long ago the gods created earth, in Jove's fair image man was shaped at birth. The beasts for lesser parts were designed, yet were too remote from humankind. To fill the gap and join the rest of man, the Olympian host conceived a clever plan. A beast they wrought in its semi-human figure, filled it with vice, and called the thing a N-word.
Whoa. Yeah,
Yes.
geez, H.P. Lovecraft sucks.
That was
That stinks to
really
hear that.
deflating to hear that.
Yeah.
That work was obviously like, it's funny because if you don't know about some of this stuff and you just hear people say, oh, H.P. Lovecraft was racist, and you're like, well, give me proof, give me evidence. Then they tell you this, and it's like, oh yeah, he was. Okay.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like, well, I mean, was this person a product of their time, and like there's like a piece of that there, but I don't know. I think in by 1912, especially in the northern like part of the
Yeah.
country, it seems like this is kind of holding on to some antiquated, um, out of fashion, I think.
Right.
You should probably know a little bit better, especially considering himself like an intellectual.
Yeah. And I mean, this is 1912, so I mean, this is during that challenging period of time where he was like in that close relationship with his mother prior,
Yeah.
obviously, to his marriage, which was 1921. So I mean, this is earlier, obviously, but still very disappointing and telling.
Pointing
Just
and, like yeah, it's at a terrible time. And like, I mean, obviously, this is like the civil rights movements is like in the beginning in the 50s and the 60s.
yeah,
So it's like this is still, I mean, kind of like Jim Crow era. But I mean, again, we're talking about New England, which we really, I guess, is like a slap in the face to like my sort of, I don't know, naive thought that up north we were a little bit better about this kind of stuff, and maybe
yeah,
not.
right,
You know?
yep. So a lot of his works also had some hostile views towards Jewish people, which is interesting as his wife was Jewish.
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, she was Ukrainian. She had Ukrainian Jewish ancestry, and she had said that she would repeatedly remind him of her background when he made anti-Semitic remarks. And she was quoted as saying, "Whenever we found ourselves in the racially mixed crowds which characterized New York, um, he would become livid with rage. He almost seemed to lose his mind." So he was really struggling when he was in New York. And it's funny because he like really seemed to like Providence, and he considered himself like his plot says, "I am Providence," like that he identifies. And I wonder if it's because Providence was less diverse at the time.
Well, in like older sort of New England, so here's New York City, sort of like the melting pot, like historically known for like these waves of immigration, and it's like these people who didn't have the same foothold that I did. I think maybe on some level he's like, I should be further along. How are these people that just got here doing so much better than me? It maybe if there weren't so many or maybe if I didn't have this kind of like competition or
Yeah.
whatever he's thinking, like I would be doing better in life and almost blaming it on others that he, with all the advantages that he did have, still isn't doing well. So instead of like being like, wow, like these people are managing to freaking do pretty well and I'm still writing my little stories and everything like that, which is fine, but like, don't be surprised. Like, I mean, I guess on some level, don't be surprised if you're gonna like spend your life writing stories and trying to sell them to pulp magazines that things are gonna be a little tough,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm not going to get into too much more because I think a lot of this stuff might be already known, but if it's not, you easily could look into this more. I don't think you need much more evidence that he's racist than those, like the couple of things we've already mentioned. But like even his work, like The Shadow over Innsmouth,
Hmm.
a lot of that is about mixing of races and cultures in an old New England town, and just kind of like looking at how it starts to the town like the culture there starts to deteriorate almost. And he mentions like these hybrids who are described as having no personal interest beyond swimming and drinking bootleg liquor. um, the old generation is horrified by the concepts of inbreeding, and it's just like there's a lot of like this negative view of like the way the world's changing, and how like races and cultures are becoming more mixed and integrated, and he's just struggling to accept that through his work. It feels like he's
Yeah, that's a
expressing it
weird
through
thing
his
because
work.
inbreeding, yes, bad, but like mixing like interracial matches is actually the far opposite of that, and actually, you know, biologically speaking, is super healthy and creates, I don't know, I'm not a like geneticist or whatever, but like, the further you are away from your own gene pool, the better,
wait
right?
wait you're not a geneticist?
No.
What is your credentials? And that's why you're on here.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I don't even know geneticist is a thing.
I thought you were a geneticist. Damn it. All right, well,
You
I
start
think,
getting one of these stories or what?
yeah, I think the controversies are pretty clear. So let's start off with the Dunwich horror recap, hosted by Greg Charpentier the third and
That's
fourth.
right. And yes, exactly. You're right, exactly right. Actually, I always was jealous of the number after the name, but I'm okay with it now. I didn't even have a Greg Jr. Well, whatever. What are you gonna do? So,
Boo.
Dunwich Horror Recap. So, it's a tale of cosmic dread in rural Massachusetts, of course, centered on this monstrously developed Wilbur Wadley. He's the son of a deformed mother and Yog Sothoth, which, we'll get into that, but that's like this like mythical unknown creature. He studies forbidden lore, grows to immerse like this huge being, and with his sorcerer grandfather, summons an unseen colossal entity from another dimension, leading to climactic confrontation where like he has to go to this college or this university and figure out all these ancient incantations from the Necronomicon to stop the horror from breaking through the earth. Now, what's interesting about this specific tale, so I mean, just to kind of like clear that up a little bit, it's like this old creepy town. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's this weird family that no one really kind of confronts and stops them from doing what they're doing. So like the problem just grows and grows and grows. And what's interesting is the people, the intellectuals, are able to sort of discover some kind of incantations, which actually stop this thing, this colossal monster, from taking over the world, which is what it was threatening to do.
Yeah,
Um, what's interesting here is like the people win. That doesn't typically happen in Lovecraft stories.
sure.
Um, but I think for this, it's important to like let's talk a little bit about the themes and
Yeah.
elements
I also just really
of the
quick, I
story.
want to also
Yeah.
mention Miskatonic University is where the
Yeah.
Necronomicon is being held, and that's where he goes to try to get access to, and he's at first denied, right? They said like, no, you don't need to. I forget what the
It,
explanation was, right?
well, it's essentially forbidden knowledge, right? I mean, like
Yeah.
it's like this thing. You know what I was kind of thinking of when I was reading this? It's like, well, I wanted to ask you on some level in the case of forbidden knowledge, and we will get to that a little bit more, but we might as well just kind of get to it right now. Um, like, do you think that there should be like is that something that's
So
necessary? Like for knowledge to be
this is
forbidden?
actually gonna come up in the next
Okay.
story too.
Yeah, like
This
it's an
idea of
interesting
forbidden
thing.
knowledge, stuff that, and I was going to ask you a question about it as well, actually, and I'll save that for after with that. But like, so in regards to forbidden knowledge, like in this story, like what would be the question? Whether there should be stuff that is withheld?
Well, and so I mean, my mind kind of because of the Necronomicon, my mind kind of went to like books. Like remember the Anarchist Cookbook?
Yeah.
So, there's things like that. There's stuff that once you know, like when we talked about the school shooting, maybe that is forbidden knowledge in a sense because now you've introduced it to the social consciousness and now it makes it possible to happen again. So it's like maybe if you didn't know certain things, there would be no possible way for them to happen. And as soon as you know them now, they're like it's almost like Pandora's box. Like you open this, oh, it was actually a jar if you read the actual myth, but whatever. You open it up and all these horrible things enter the world and it's like that makes a pretty decent argument for whether or not there should be things that you shouldn't know. Like even today, the amount of news and like horrible things that we consume on a daily basis, like that's probably, it affects our emotions, but we're not able to we have no agency to act on any of it. So is it good for us to know that? I don't know. It's just, it's unanswerable question right now.
And who's to
Um,
say? And
and
who's to
who's to
say
say?
whether it is? Yeah.
I don't know.
I
Um,
also brought up the Miskatonic University because he does a cool thing in his works where things, it's like Stephen King does this too. There's a Stephen King universe, and Lovecraft definitely has it as well because Miskatonic University is also referenced in the story that I did, and there's like crossover. You could actually probably map out all the different places that are mentioned, and like you could have a Lovecraft map that would look slightly different, similar but slightly different from the reality of these, of where these places are. Like I'm pretty sure this, I was trying to figure out where this probably took place, and
well,
I'm
rural
thinking like
Maps was probably not rural anymore.
I was thinking it was like the Berkshires,
It could be, totally.
somewhere over there. But who knows? Yeah, at that time maybe it could have been somewhere else.
So there's another theme of like degeneracy versus purity. So a conflict contrast between like the tainted bloodline of the Waddleys and the people like the guy Dr. Armitage, who is the hero in this story, and he attempts to combat the chaos. So this might have been like a good day for Lovecraft, where he's like, all these horrible things that happen in my life, I'm writing about it. But what if I, this intellectual, could combat this chaos in some way? I almost felt like he saw himself as Dr. Armitage.
Okay,
Like
yeah.
that's like his dream, like what he wanted to be. Like he wanted to go to Brown and he wanted to, be this intellectual and a professor, but didn't work that way. But I think he
You,
saw himself that way still.
you know what's interesting? In the beginning of the story, as they're like going in by this town, they
Mm.
describe the people who live there as what? Inbreds?
Yes. Like so it's good. I'm glad you bring that up. And like it's isolated, right? They describe it as isolated, and they say there's one of the themes in the story from a literary like archetype is community complicity. So there's this sense that there are things going on in this town, and since they're like not quote unquote Lovecraft would call them like not like moral people, they don't really stop and do something about like the decay of the town, and it just kind of gets worse and worse and worse. And like there's this willful ignorance that the rest of the town's not really doing anything negative, but they know something very dangerous is going on and they don't do anything about it. And I almost felt like the immigration theme there.
Yeah.
You know what I
That's
mean?
kind of where I'm going here. Like, I feel like he's looking at these individuals of this town
Mm,
as kind of being others compared to the sophisticated intellectuals who I think, yeah, as you know, as you even noticed, like if almost like he's identifying with them, him
yeah.
personally, right? And who are these others? They're inbreds, or they're um, and they're evil, right? They're looking to condone, like to engage in evil things
Yeah,
or
and are
condone.
we the people who are here, if we are like complicit and we don't do anything to stop this group, are we like morally failing just the same?
Yeah,
Like so that's his like sort of call to action.
sure.
Whatever that is, I don't know. It's kind of like you can kind of see that's what's interesting about writing. Like you can kind of see people's views and like who they are through their like storytelling, and I think that's kind of interesting,
Absolutely.
for better or for
Yeah.
worse. Of course, this story uses a lot of ambiguity, and it's like this indirect horror. Like the monster, you don't really, it's invisible or amorphous, and it's unseen, and um, I think that's like part of his way of saying like our limited perspective and our limited capacity to control the chaos, which is the world. Like, I mean, think about it today. We're kind of having a hard time, people behind the scenes, with like technology. Like the weather is causing some kind of chaos that we have no control over. There's always some kind of thing trying to thwart our plans as human beings that we have no control over. Like you can get sick, this can happen, that can happen. It's just kind of the nature, especially, in the early 1900s. It's probably happening a lot more.
Yeah.
Um, I can say that, what else could I say about this? Like I like this story. Um, like this it's interesting in that it's very kind of like Poe-like, where just in the way he describes the landscape, it's got this gothic sort of vibe to it. And then the climax, of course, involves a bunch of like incantations and like sort of somehow through the right words, we're able to cast this, through the right words and the right knowledge, I guess, we're able to cast this whatever entity back to wherever it came from. Um,
What's
and
Greg? Can you remind me? At the very end, there is a big revelation when they see what the creature looks like. Do you
yeah,
remember what that was?
no, no, not exactly. It's funny, like to be in complete honesty too. We read this back in October.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I'm struggling a little bit with that detail, but I know it was an important revelation. And
Yeah.
so he's his twin. It's the twin to Wilbur, right? The
Yes.
creature. When they
That's
look
right.
at it,
It's
it's
that's
it's
right. There's a
Wilbur's twin,
brother. Yep.
but the twin resembles more of his their father, and the father, I'm assuming, is like a devilish creature,
Yeah, the father is, and so is the mother.
right?
Oh, no, the mother is like was a bad person, quote unquote. But the father was this, it was a strange name, like Yog something or other,
Yeah.
and it was just like this strange entity from, of course, Lovecraftian, God only knows where. Not a demon from hell or anything like that, which is weird that like that we have incantations to sort of fight against it. But it just basically comes down to, in the end, this is why I like this story, because it's different from his typical stories where like it's figured out and it's wrapped up pretty neatly,
Yeah. So their
and
father was the
yeah,
Yog Sothoth or
that's right.
whatever, who was an outer god. But
An outer god.
so the twin brother resembled more of that. Wilbur resembled more human in appearance, but was like freakishly large, right? Wasn't
Yes.
he like constantly growing and like
Constantly growing. Like they had like he like his head went through the roof of the house or something at one point.
yeah.
Like craziness. Yeah, it's just it's a weird story. Okay, two things at one time. It's a weird story, but it's for Lovecraft, it's a sort of like simple ghost story at the same time.
Yeah.
It's not like off the wall.
I had a
Um,
hard time with this story in all honesty. Actually, sometimes when you're reading, you can envision everything that you're reading as you're reading it, right? Like you get
mhm.
a clear picture in your head. There were some things I was having a hard time, and this is part of the problem with him with some of his descriptions of things, but like I was having a hard time sometimes visualizing in my head what some of this stuff would look like. That was
Yeah, I
for
mean,
me tough.
for me, I had a good look at the town. I had a good look at the college, and like, yeah, I could see that.
Some of like when they would talk about Wilbur, when they would talk about the invisible, that whole like kind of scene. But yeah, ultimately I enjoyed the story quite a bit.
Which one did you like better? That one or the other one that you covered?
Kind of like Mountains of Madness, just because the story itself, so it's significantly longer, well, which is notable. And Mountains of Madness actually was rejected for that Weird Tales and a number of times just because of the length of the story. I mean, it's long compared
Yeah.
to Dunwich Horror, which I think is still long for a short story too, right? If I remember
Well, yeah.
correctly.
I mean, yeah. It takes about probably because it takes about an hour and a half, 2 hours to read.
Yeah.
So it's pretty long for a short story. Yeah.
So yeah, but the story of at Mountains of Madness, I think, is a little bit more developed, which
All right, well, hit us with
with the
it.
length. So all right. So at Mountains of Madness is told in this first person perspective by William Dyer, who is a geologist and a professor at Arkham's Miskatonic University. There it is again. So him and there's a research team that's planning out this trip to Antarctica, and Dyer is basically sharing his experience with them to persuade them not to go because of how horrible of an experience he had. So then they go into the story of when he and a team of about 20 sailed from south of Boston with all this equipment, manpower, and everything, and they go to Antarctica and they begin to search for their landing space. They make camp. They begin to explore. But while there, one of the professors, Professor Lake, gets the urge to explore a distant part of the region. He takes a few people with him, and then he takes a plane because they have access to numerous planes. And he radios back that he was very excited to tell them this discovery that would potentially change the world. So they gather around the radio and they're listening to him talk about, um, these discovered remains of more than a dozen unknown life forms. So some of these have, they've been damaged or injured, but eight are perfectly preserved. And there's something between plant and animal with strangely shaped bodies, numerous tentacles and wings. And he believes that they even have capacity to use tools, but their existence does not fit into any established idea of how life on Earth formed. Um, so the rest of the expedition prepares to go join them, but they end up losing contact with them. When they fly out, they discover a terrible accident has occurred, and only there's one man and one dog that are missing, and the rest are all dead. The wounded creatures seem to have been buried, while the pristine specimens have vanished from the ransacked camp. Dyer and a student named Danforth take one of the planes and explore some nearby mountains. And there they make the discovery behind the gigantic mountain range. There's an architecture of a city that does not resemble anything of the human world, and it ends up reminding him of this mythology of the old ones.
Mm.
Again, this is mentioned in Dunwich Horror, so some overlap here. So they explore the abandoned city. There's with all the established buildings and all that. He examines carvings and murals in the buildings, and he learns the history of the old ones. And he learns that they came from space and they colonized Earth tens of millions of years ago. And they used their intelligence to create artificial life forms named Shoggoths,
Mm.
which they used as a slave workforce to construct many cities. The Shoggoths were made of black slime and covered in hundreds of eyes, and they had the ability to take any form. Um, the old ones took over Earth. They formed new life forms from. They farmed new life forms for food. They fought against any invading species, and they even put down a Shoggoth rebellion. So the Shoggoths actually came together and tried to rebel. Um, Eventually, they retreated to their city in Antarctica and then into the subterranean ocean below the continent. Their history also hints that they were more terrible life forms, even taller mountains of the on the horizon. So, all that to be said, they realized that the old ones that he had discovered, that Lake had discovered previously, had returned to life and killed everyone in the camp. So it was them that actually killed them. They find the bodies of the missing man and dog as they try to explore the underground tunnels. They discover a number of giant blind penguins that the old ones had used for food. And in one of the tunnels, they find an old one that a Shoggoth has killed. The Shoggoth presents itself and chases them out of the tunnel. They get into a plane to escape. And as they fly away, Danforth looks back to the city and he experiences a vision implied to be of the great evil lurking in the distant mountains. The vision eventually drives him insane. So Dyer finishes his account that he is warning the people of, and he says that he believes the Shoggoths had destroyed the old one civilization, so eventually they had kind of like overcome, and that the evil in the hidden parts of Antarctica is too much for humans to bear. And he warns anyone planning an expedition to reconsider.
We consider that. You don't want to be going there. Yeah, so like this, that's another kind of Lovecraftian theme where now you have this knowledge and it it's so intense
It drives you
that
insane.
it drives you insane. Yeah, like
Yeah.
that. I mean, do you think that like even his parents, like both kind of having like mental breaks and himself, um, I don't know, like does he is it his way of like explaining that?
Wow. Yeah, I actually didn't even think of that. So I mean, yeah, he's had all these experiences with people having these breakdowns and things like that. Is that something he feels caused their breakdowns? They had too much knowledge.
Yeah,
They
like
were
sometimes
so intellectual that they had nervous breakdowns.
or the wrong kind of knowledge.
The
Or
wrong
for
kind of knowledge.
yeah.
Yeah. You know, he is all about like heeding warning. It goes back to like forbidden knowledge, like you were saying, and man's need for exploration and how like dangerous it can lead you to like dangerous places, right?
Yeah, like does it come up weirdly I was thinking of the immigration thing again. I mean, maybe because it's like everywhere and it's like is he trying to say like stay where you're at and don't travel because it's dangerous?
Well, I mean, it's almost like he's reflecting too on, slavery involved exploration, right?
Yep.
So they were exploring different, continents and things like that, and that they find different cultures and different races, and then they take slaves, and then those slaves eventually, group together, and then there's uproar, and there's upturning and things like that, and that's kind of like what happens with the Shoggoths. They create this slave race that ends up overturning them.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
it's like he's afraid of the ones that we discover. It's almost like if Lovecraft had his way in a perfect world, everybody in his community would just never change and never never,
Yeah.
explore, because exploration can be really dangerous. It leads you to making yourself vulnerable, right? So he's very
Interesting.
against this.
He is against that. And he's a very homebody person
Right.
in
This
Providence.
this story also makes me think of like UFOs and government cover-ups and things like that. And
Oh,
is
there
there
was the Dyatlov Pass. I thought about that when reading this. Have you ever heard that story?
which
Where
one
the
is that?
people were in like Russia and they were like kind of I don't know, maybe they were camping or something. It was a really snowy condition. I guess it could be like the Arctic if it was like near Siberia or something. Um, and like they were just attacked and torn apart in their tents and no one really ever knows how or why. It reminded me of that.
Yeah.
And also like the mention of Arkham, which was mentioned in the Dunwich Horror too, and that's like that Batman prison.
Yeah. Yeah, there's I
So
mean
that,
Batman obviously borrows from that as well,
yeah,
which is
so it's like,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, just
He does seem to present this theme over and over though. Like I was saying, like with UFOs and government cover-ups of that. It's like, is there information that's
paranoid.
too much for us
Is,
to handle?
is
Like,
it part of like paranoia for him? Because
well, it's just I think I'm there's a part of this that could be validated too, though. Is there information that if the general population knew about it, would cause widespread panic, would cause,
that's a
maybe that
great sort of
insane,
point. Yeah.
yeah, maybe that going insane is actually his version of like people's panic they get if they were to know of new, life forms that are more advanced than us. They could get it, or this impending doom. Maybe
Like
that
a
could
comet's
cause,
gonna hit in like 4 days. Like,
right.
do we
Maybe people would go not insane, but just they would just panic.
something like the Y2K thing? Like
Sure.
anytime people think the
Yeah.
world's gonna
So
end.
maybe maybe if you don't take it as literal of insane and you just kind of look for different variations, maybe there is actually something to this. I did think, like, obviously this Shoggoth's parallels to slavery is you know obvious.
Yep.
uh the overturning of the systems of power leads to absolute horror. What is he saying here? But I also thought, like, is there another way to see this? Just does it is it an obvious interpretation here, or is there something else that he was presenting? I don't know.
Mm, I don't
um
either.
Another interesting theme here, though, which I think is like, he was way ahead of his time with this. The man-made part of it makes me think of like AI
Yep.
and some of the stuff that we're, talking about today, dealing with today. You create this thing that you think works for you, and eventually it's the thing that is your downfall because it doesn't actually work for you because you've made it so powerful or so intelligent.
Yeah, that's sort of like Terminator stuff.
Yeah, it's AI,
It's
you know.
AI. Yeah, yeah. And
In
then you wrote down this was this inspired the thing, John Carpenter?
John Carpenter's 1982 The Thing with Kurt Russell
Great
was
movie.
this, and it's that as soon as I started reading this, I was like, that was the first thing I thought of was The Thing. This was like a very obvious inspiration. It's filled with paranoia. That The Thing, it's such a good movie. If you haven't seen it, people should definitely watch it. It's isolating. It's claustrophobic. It's a great wintertime movie.
Yeah.
But it also inspired Mouth of Madness, which is another 80s horror film. The Void, which was actually one that I really enjoyed, is 2016. Stephen Kostansky is a Canadian director. Underwater, which had Kristen Stewart in it, and at the end, there's a very Cthulhu-like monster that ends up showing up. I actually really enjoyed that film, and Guillermo del Toro actually wants to adapt this, but feels it would be really hard to do it justice.
Yeah,
Um,
of course.
so
That's the problem with that's why you don't see him all over. I mean, even like Stranger Things in the did you watch any of that? You watched that,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So the end, it's like you can't you have this like sort of grandiose Lovecraftian monster throughout all the seasons. But then when it comes time to fight it, it just like you have to take all its power away because it doesn't make any sense anymore.
yeah,
Right? You know what I mean? So it's not like this like sky completely taking up the entire sky creature anymore. Now it's just kind of like a big ass spider or something. You know what I mean? Eh,
yeah.
You have to
I,
kind of like dumb it down, and that's the problem with adapting Lovecraft type stories.
if someone could do it, it would be Guillermo del Toro. He is an
Absolutely.
amazing. I mean, he just did
You
the
know, because
Frankenstein
this had
movie.
parallels to Frankenstein with the Arctic and everything.
Yes. Oh, for sure,
So, and
for
he
sure.
did that pretty well.
Yeah.
But a Frankenstein probably obviously a lot easier to adapt than this. So, Dave, the question that you had posed that began this whole episode was like, can you appreciate someone's work while recognizing their extreme flaws? And in today's pop culture, I mean, we have Puff Daddy, we've got Michael Jackson, we've got I mean, R.
Bill
Kelly.
Cosby.
Bill Cosby, there's so many sort of examples of this. And I think this is on like most things like on a spectrum. But you know what's ironic is I read this quote and I kind of use it in therapy, but then I was thinking, wow, like this actually might kind of apply here. And the quote is, and it's Khalil Gibran, which is a great it's from the prophet. So the deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. And I was thinking, oh, okay, that's like kind of makes sense, right? But then, what about the darker the capacity, the more good or potential you could contain? And maybe like that might not, sort of translate, but what might is, and now I didn't write this down, but like I'm thinking of like Hitler huge capacity for evil. Does that mean that he had a huge capacity for good? Not necessarily. No. But what I think it does mean is because of his atrocities, that somehow brought out goodness in others. Do you know what I'm saying?
It gave people potential to show a side of themselves that they might not have been able to go to been called for
Like Frankel, for
previously.
example, right? Like
Yeah.
people who, bravery and like the people who cared for the people in the camps and saved them. I just like remember 9/11 when that whole tragedy happened, terrible tragedy, but think about like how emboldened Americans were, like we kind of all came together and wanted to like support each other and help each other. It brought out the good in a lot of people. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like maybe these people who have done horrible things or on varying levels um maybe we can't dismiss the work completely because it could cause people to do good things in its wake, I think.
Yeah. And I think that has been highlighted with just the sheer amount of works that are influenced or inspired by him.
Yeah, of
So, as we mentioned, the thing, Alien, one of
course.
the thing in Alien, if you ever ask anyone who loves horror, that's like our age, Greg, a lot of them will say that's those two are in like their top horror films or their favorite some of their favorite movies or The Lighthouse, which came out a few years back, or Reanimator, or Stephen King's The Mist has a Lovecraftian creature in it. The Evil Dead, like I mentioned before, there's just so many different things, and I'm not even really tapping into the literary world when I'm talking about this and how many people were
Yeah.
influenced by him. Uh, it's just there is a lot. So yeah, he has allowed a lot of people to be able to shine through his works and through kind of his inspirations. I
And the other
all
thing is too, Dave,
good.
like we talked about before, like the forbidden knowledge thing. Like once that thing is out there, I mean, the work's going to influence no matter what. No matter if we decide like, oh, this can't be influenced. It's like, well, no, it already has.
Yeah.
It's already there.
Well, the other part of it is there a way to like is there value in using these works to first off maybe highlight some of those negative themes or thoughts that he had and kind of like use those as talking points, right? Or can you use his works to, look at them through a different lens to analyze? Like I was saying, like using that theme of the Shoggoths and, creating in this thing that ends up becoming the thing that threatened you in the end and kind of discussing AI and like its potential dangers. Like it doesn't have to always come back to the thing we know about him. We're choosing that because we're filtering the way we're looking at all of his works through that, which is, I mean, in some of his works it's unavoidable because of how direct it is, but in others we're looking to interpret it because we know his thoughts, we know his views about these things, so we're looking at it with intention. But we
Yeah, and
could
it's
also take it unrelated and look at it through other lenses, and trust me, we could come up with 1,000 other themes to discuss and have valuable conversations around those.
they say like there's that phrase like don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like
Yeah.
let's find the good in things and use that and discard the not be influenced by what's wrong with it, you
Since I
know?
never had kids, I would always say, don't throw your retainer out with your lunch at the cafeteria, because I did that once. It was horrible.
You had a retainer?
Yeah. and I threw it away, and I had to go dig through the trash because I didn't want to tell my
Yeah,
parents I lost
my
it.
my my son Jack had a retainer and threw it away constantly.
Yeah, it's hard not to. I have a question about Lovecraft too.
Okay.
Is he a sympathetic character at all? There's a part
Hmm.
of me that looks at his story, and while I can't, like, obviously, there's no world that I live in that I can take his views and be like, oh yeah, that I can understand that. Like I pretty strongly uh feel the opposite of all of his views, but I look at his story and I'm like, wow, he's had a number of pretty significant losses early on, and a lot of struggles. I first I started to feel a little sympathetic for him, but then as we're talking, and you kind of pointed out that thing of like, yeah, he's kind of like a perpetual victim at times. It feels like, I
And
mean, and
that's
this
that's
is
hard to
us.
feel bad for. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
that
it's
exactly. You
hard.
kind of lose that when you see that.
It's okay to like be if you're a victim, hey, you're a victim. You don't get to choose victimhood. It is kind of a choice to stay a victim in a lot of ways. But to blame it on people, yeah, to take no. So the things that happened to him weren't his fault, but they were his responsibility to fix. You
And
know?
knowing how intelligent he was, knowing how the level of talent and skill he had at writing and learning and with science and everything, and then he just sits there and like, well, doesn't just sit there, but like when he's struggling, he looks around at everyone else as if it's their fault
Yeah.
versus like, look at all your untapped potential, dude. You're like submitting these works to people and like, sometimes getting denied. It's like, maybe you got to shift and try something else too. Like if during those times versus like just being angry and, I don't know. It's so hard too because like I'm sure there's obviously more to the story than this brief bio that we get. But when you hear that, when you see some of the thought process and how he was responding to situations, it becomes a little bit harder to feel sympathetic for him. But on those his early story is one about struggle.
It is, yeah, and both parents going down like that, and him having his own mental health struggles, and it's almost like I guess that's an element too that we kind of didn't get into. Um, he's mentally ill.
Yeah,
I mean, how much does that play a role, right? I
right.
mean, he like they're kind of describing what appears to have been manic episodes, which should at times often suggests, paranoid delusions, which he could be, suffering from, which is causing this like sort of hypervigilance and this, misread on the people around him. Like
Yeah.
part of it could be mental illness.
I also think it's interesting how isolation seems like it can spawn hate.
Oh
So,
yeah.
he isolates in when he's in New York. He, is and he's just it feels like he really digs into some of those negative viewpoints he has of people who don't look like him or who he doesn't affiliate with. And yeah. I had this other interesting ironic story, I guess you would say, about that ties to H.P. Lovecraft. So the film Color Out of Space was adapted a few years back. That's an H.P. Lovecraft story, and the film starred Nicolas Cage and some other individuals, but it was directed by Richard Stanley. Are you familiar with Richard Stanley?
No.
So he's infamous for the really failed remake of Island of Dr. Moreau,
Ah, yeah.
and he's known for being very eccentric. And that whole film was that's the one with Val Kilmer, Marlon
Yep, yep,
Brando.
yep. I remember. Yeah.
Failed significantly, but the biggest failure was actually like the filming of it. It was a horrible set. Everybody like people were getting fired, dropped off, and Richard Stanley was connected to that for a while. So he did Color Out of Space, and he is another individual who also, so after this comes out, then there's all these allegations of significant domestic abuse in his relationships. So it comes out, and immediately people hear these allegations, which I don't know if they were founded or not. I don't believe they were founded. Um, People immediately boycott his work. So he was on board to create this film that was supposed to get some good reception, and immediately becomes failure because of the allegations that were tied. It became a big he said she said type thing. But I mean, the allegations against him were pretty significant of physical
Yeah.
abuse in the relationship, so I don't want to
That's a huge
minimize that.
conversation because that's a huge part of culture now. Like obviously cancel culture would
Sure.
be like a huge conversation.
But it's another one of those situations. Should we do we boycott the work? Do we allow ourselves to watch it? Is that supporting that individual? I mean, in some ways it's also supporting other individuals who are clearly
Or
attached to
okay,
the
yeah.
project. But I just thought it was ironic that here we are, you got HP and all the controversy with him, and then you have someone else who then also has controversy adapting his work. So it's kind of almost like a meta, I guess, but in a different way. So yeah. All right.
That's a lot of HP Lovecraft.
That's a lot of HP Lovecraft. So yeah, I guess that sums it up.
That sums it up, Dave. It
Yeah.
does. And now sorry, but I have to go check on a young one and shovel because it probably snowed another 7 inches while we've been talking.
I am sure it did. I am sure it
Oof.
did. So yeah, everybody make sure you hop onto Patreon and support the show.
Support the show.
Watch our video, all that good stuff. We will see you next week with a new episode, and we'll see you earlier than that with a bonus episode if you are on Patreon. So we will see you then. Everybody, have a great night and be safe.
Be safe.